All right, guys, welcome aboard once again to the Sunday Mac Forum video chat. We hope that you are going to enjoy this evening's festivities. As usual, we'll have a forum roundup, a little bit of Mac-related news, a few tips and tricks here and there. And then I'm going to have just very, very briefly some first impressions of the 27-inch iMac, the late 2015 variety that was released recently. I finally made a few updates here and there. Haven't completely pitched the MacBook, my 2008 MacBook Pro to the curb. In fact, I'm broadcasting from it now because something is weird with the Google plugin installation on the new machine, and I discovered it about 5 minutes before the chat was supposed to start. So we're resorting to broadcasting from Old Faithful for this evening, but we'll have some just a rough idea for you about some of my first impressions, and then we'll have a more detailed review in a future episode, probably Thanksgiving week. By then I'll have had the week to really put it through its paces. Might even do a pre-Thanksgiving chat sometime during that week. I'm going to try to round up a couple of forum members. I wouldn't mind having them on the show. Celebration of the holidays beginning. Maybe I can strong arm few of them into doing an update and a podcast for us. So let's get right into things. Today, we have a total of 282,728 members. And the newest of those members, give me just 1 second there, had to turn something down there, Jamila 31H. So welcome to Jamila and all of our new members this week. We usually pick up a few new members every week. Sometimes because they have a question, and that's the best way to ask a question. And sometimes just because they've been working around a while, they get a look at the community and decide they like it and want to chime in, join in, whatever you want to put, however you want to put it. Of course, doesn't cost you anything to lurk. If you want to ask a question, however, you need to become a member. It doesn't cost you anything to become a member unless you want to become a premium member and help us defray some of the hosting costs and the like. Also, I want to point out, if you're lurking the forum and you have a question, it's not really productive to post that in the contact us thread, to post your question there, because that thread is only seen by a handful of our moderators, a handful of members who are moderators or admins. And the purpose of that is to handle questions relative to operation of the forum, not to the solving of specific questions. All right, so let's as we get right into things, let's go ahead and take a look at some of the other things that are going on in the forum. We still have quite a few people asking questions about El Capitan, whether it's a good idea, bad idea, that kind of thing. One of our members posted today about an issue with video and audio lags and the like with El Capitan, but they are running on a 2 GB system in terms of memory. I have to tell you, folks, yes, I know Apple says El Capitan will run on 2 GB. It will, but barely. It seems to be that this may be just my imagination, but it seems to me that back in the day, Apple would give you a memory requirement and say such and such OS takes a certain amount of memory. And that was the amount of memory that it needed to run reasonably well. Whereas on the Windows side, you got generally the absolute bare bones minimum. Well, it seems to me that recently Apple seems to have started reporting the bare bones minimum that you need to get the OS up and running, as opposed to what you need to get it running well. And I really wish that if they have changed that, I don't know if it's an official policy or if it's just my impression, but I really wish that they would go back to, if it's been an official change, go back to reporting to us what we need to do well to run the OS well. I realize that there are people out there who would not understand that distinction, as if they're new Mac users, they wouldn't necessarily understand, and they might misinterpret the requirement. But I think you could make that clear and certainly make it more useful than having people trying to run the OS on 2 GB RAM, which really, to be honest with you, is not going to work well. All right, so let's move to a couple of other things. As far as our tips and tricks are concerned, several of the tips this week have to do with the new Apple TV, which I do not have, but that's what the net is talking about. Various things, some of the Apple-related news that I've looked at this week focused on that. I'm sure there was other news, but this is the stuff that caught my attention. First of all, some Apple TV users that have the new version are reporting that they do not necessarily like the new remote for some functions. For example, if you're swiping through a long list, they find that swipe a little cumbersome, and they'd like to be able to go back to the idea of holding down a button, an arrow key, to scroll through a list quickly. Well, the good news for you is that if you like the older Apple remote better, it will work with the new Apple TV. Of course, I think there are going to be some functions that obviously it's not going to handle well because it wasn't built with those functions in mind. But for some things, if you prefer that remote, the one that came with the Apple TV 3 and previous generations, you should be able to have it function. Because you can define a remote in the Apple TV software, that should also allow you to have both of them functional, if I'm not mistaken. Haven't tested that, but it should work. Obviously, you don't necessarily have to have 2 remotes operational, but that's certainly available as an option. It will function on its own as a single remote with the Apple TVs. Just some things might be a little cumbersome to do. And then a little bit of info regards the Apple TV. Pointed out this week, some of the sales figures seem to indicate that Apple has sold nearly 7 million watches since it was introduced. That figure comes from one of the tracking firms that watches these kinds of things. It's not an official number that came from Apple. I think they're holding those numbers close to the vest. But if those numbers are accurate, that would mean that they have outsold other vendors since the time that these wearables started catching on. And it would also mean, it looks like the numbers for something on the order of having moved 300,000 units in third quarter of 2015. That's quite a bit of Apple Watches going out the door. There are some suggestions I've seen in a couple places that the number might have been higher had they not had some problems initially with supply. You guys know that whenever Apple releases a new product, oftentimes takes a little while for the supply to catch up with the pent-up demand. Another little tidbit about the Apple TV remote that I saw has to do with, with it being touch sensitive, part of it being glass, much like the iPhone screens. And you over at Cult Mac, they have a picture of one remote that was dropped from basically lap level onto a tile floor with crack, and that is now cracked. That glass area is now cracked. So I don't know if there's going to be a lot of complaints there, but you are going to want to obviously take steps to take care of your remote and not knock it around perhaps as much as you would some others. The older remote is really durable. This one, obviously, with that glass piece, you're going to want to be a little more careful with. That picture comes from Cult of Mac, and also from Cult of Mac, our old buddy Rob Lefevre has some thoughts on some audio settings that you can do on the new Apple TV. By swiping downward while a video is playing, it brings up a menu that controls several audio options. Among those options, allows you to boost, to control loud sounds, so they're not boosted quite as much, enhance dialogue, or control where a video is output. So those may come in handy for you. It's an easy place to access that information. The menu looks, from the picture that I saw, looks to be easy to understand. Also from Rob Lefevre, he has another little tidbit about Apple TV remote, and it's some tips on how you can become an Apple TV remote power user, essentially. Some tips and tricks for entering special characters in menus, moving quickly, navigational issues, how to move app icons around, deleting app icons, and some faster swiping and entering of alternate characters. Take a look at that if you do have the new Apple TV new remote. I haven't decided on getting an Apple TV right now. Obviously, we've had other things in the pipe. There are some interesting features about it. At some point, I may delve into that, but for now, that's a lot of the Apple TV related info. Seems to be a lot of positive things that were included in this update. But for me, let's move on to a couple of the 10 bits and pieces of information regarding El Capitan. First of all, make sure that you keep up with the updates that come out, particularly if you are using the Microsoft Office 2016. That seems to work better with the 11.1 Microsoft Office 2016 working with 10.11.1 better, and improve that among other things. Also, you want to, we had a question in the forum today from a user. My apologies for not remembering the username, who is asking, when you go to do a software update, would it be better, say you're going from 10.11 to 10.11.1, for example. Question was, what would be the best way to do it? Do I download it through the App Store? Do I look for the combo updater? Or do I re-download the OS and set up an installer? Okay, here are my thoughts on the matter at this point. If, as is the case with this particular user, you have a valid clone of your system, be it made from Carbon Copy Cloner, Super Duper, or any one of the other pieces of cloning software. If you have a valid clone, then not having a bootable installer is perhaps less of an issue than it would be for other people. So that would be my last resort, especially if you are in with an internet provider that has you on a monthly cap of some sort. Since you have the bootable clone to work from, then your option, easiest and most convenient option, is to simply go and log into the App Store and download the update. That way you're going to get the update, probably the smallest possible file for your setup. The combo updater, which is option number 2, is a good thing if you've missed a couple of not only OS updates, but say other minor updates, or you're rebuilding a system and trying to get it back up to current. Then the combo updater is a good thing, because it will, in one update, roll in a lot of the previous updates into one thing, one file. But so your bandwidth-wise, capacity-wise, your least footprint is probably going to be the Apple Store update first, followed by the combo updater second, and then reverting to the third option being recreating a bootable installer. Now, if you don't have a clone of your system, then, and you've got the bandwidth to spare, then a bootable version of the OS is a good idea to have around for troubleshooting purposes. All right, let's dive into one more little tip for folks who are setting up a new machine for the first time. When you run the initial setup, you first power up the machine, and Apple walks you through the setup information. You're going to see that it's going to ask you, let's assume for a moment you want to do as I was doing, migrate information over from an existing user. Okay? Ideally, when you first run the installation setup, you would tell it, yes, I want to migrate over from another Mac or from a hard drive, and it will walk you through the steps. You have to make sure if you're migrating it from a hard drive, you want to make sure that that hard drive is available and connected. If you're migrating over from another Mac, then you want to make sure that that Mac is on and on your network or is otherwise available to you. Now, what I did this past week, as I was setting up the iMac, I wanted to just simply migrate my El Capitan setup from the operating system from my current MacBook Pro to the new machine. When I got to the point where I had to choose between creating a new user and whether I wanted to migrate my data, I took the SSD drive out of my MacBook, put it in a drive carrier, and tried to get it to mount. It was not showing. Played around with it for a little while, doing some troubleshooting, and then out of frustration, I just went ahead and created a new user. Now, here's what I did that might get you. That's not the best of solutions. Normally, that creates a lot of confusion, but here's what I did to mitigate the confusion. I made my new username exactly the same as the one on the MacBook Pro. Right? And I went ahead and walked through the setup, did all of that. Later, when I finished troubleshooting and I figured out why the new Mac was not seeing my SSD that was in the drive carrier, I went back and ran Migration Assistant. And this time, El Capitan did something interesting. and it seems to have solved. Normally, when you migrate data, you've got two accounts now, and it causes some confusion in terms of file permissions. But here's the thing. Because both accounts had exactly the same username and password, one of my options was to replace the account that I had just created with the data from my old account that was on the SSD drive. So that's what I chose, and that avoided a lot of the permissions issues. So that's something that you want to keep, that's something you want to keep in mind. It's not something I had expected. Excuse me a sec while I make a little adjustment here. We seem to be having a little bit of a technical hang up. I'm getting the spinning pinwheel of death here on the new machine, and it's got my show notes on it. But not sure what's causing that. That's the first one on the new machine. But what I mean is, normally your best scenario would be to go ahead and migrate your data when you create your initial user. If you can't do that and you want to avoid some of the permissions issues, go ahead and create the new user account on the new machine to have exactly the same username, password, etc. that was on the old machine, that's on the machine you're going to be migrating from. Then when you run it, when you run Migration Assistant later, it will ask you if you want to replace the existing account on the new machine. And you're going to want to choose yes. Now, the thing that you're going to want to do, remember, you're going to want to do this before you have made a lot of changes. What you don't want to do is wait several days, have made numerous changes to your account, and then have to erase all of that. I did this on the same night, so it worked out kind of nicely, but it's not something that you want to try on a regular basis. Now, here are some things, my first impressions of the new Mac, iMac, excuse me. First of all, I did not shoot an unboxing video. I'm not really set up for doing that. My apologies. The wife objected to shooting the unboxing video anyway. But we did not want to publicize the tug of war that we had getting the thing out of the box. Not only was it boxed up nice and tight in your usual Apple fashion, okay? You guys know things from Apple generally arrive well packed. This was no exception. All right, and then coupled with that was the fact that the vendor that I ordered from had taken so you have the Apple box on the inside, and then between the Apple box and the outer shipping box is a small layer of foam on either side, and then the shipping boxes outside of that. And it's all fit together nice and tight. I had a real good tug of war. It took both of us to get it out of the machine, out of the box. And then once you go to get it set up, you got to remove all the plastic and screen cover and those kinds of things in the usual Apple fashion. I will tell you, I'm going from my normal setup had a 24-inch Samsung monitor connected to my MacBook Pro. Right now, I've got a 27-inch iMac. It's the newer screen, the 5K screen. I gotta tell you, I am in love with these screens. I've always been a fan of Apple monitors. In years past, we've only had one Apple monitor that I didn't like, and it was one of the 17-inch CRTs. Now, a couple of things I've had to do The one of the things that I did is go in and adjust web pages so the text was a little bit larger for my vision. I did that using a CSS sheet that I had set up that I was already using, tweaked it a little bit. I've got most of the settings at a point where I like them. One of the things that I'm still getting used to, and I have to admit, I hope somebody comes up with a fix for this one of these days. Okay, let's say you're in the Finder. The main menus for the Finder, say where you go to File and Edit, etc., 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 are fine for me. But when you go into some of the other things, the text can be a little bit small. For example, in Safari, even though the File and Edit menus, those settings are okay, trying to read the shortcuts that I had in the favorite bar, those are really small. It would be nice to have a little more ability to adapt to that. Overall, I really, really like the screen. Haven't tried playing a DVD yet with it. That's something that was suggested to me as a test. Right now, I've got a 27-inch monitor in front of me with the main page, just in case some of you posted a question in the bottom of the show notes. I've got my email up on one monitor. Show notes are up there on the 24-inch. So I've got those two monitors hooked up, give you a little extra screen real estate. I'm using my laptop as the broadcast screen right now. As I say, I had a little difficulty with the Google Chat plugin. Haven't worked that out yet. I really like the sturdiness of this machine. It's got some heft to it. It weighs 30-odd pounds, 33, 35 pounds. Not quite as much as my old Mac Pro desktop unit, but almost. And as you might have heard when I rebooted, you hear a similar kind of bong. It's actually got a kind of a reassuring beefiness to it that you don't get from the laptops. I currently have only run a few things, speed tests, so we won't get into that really. I love the new Apple keyboard. Normally I don't like really small keyboards. As you can see, this is all there is to it. Really small. Okay. Normally I don't like keyboards that are that small, but this one feels really comfortable for me. And as you can tell, I have fairly large hands. The Apple mouse, the new Magic Mouse 2, once again, I like. It came basically ready to use. I didn't have to charge it. It's charging using the new Lightning connector setup. Haven't had to charge it yet. It's behaving itself. I like it. I normally am not a big fan of small mice for the same reason I'm not a fan of small keyboards. But as you can tell, this, I mean, my hand engulfs the entire thing. And as you can see, but it is comfortable for me to use. I don't normally say that about small mice. I did not get the Magic Trackpad 2 with the new Force Touch features. Didn't really need it because my first generation Magic Trackpad worked fine. I may add it at some point. It's got some nice features to it. Just didn't really need it. Now, for what I ended up with, you're looking at a 27-inch iMac with the stock setup of 8 GB of RAM. Okay. What I ended up with, I did not upgrade the memory yet. Apple's prices on memory are ridiculous, and 8 GB of RAM will hold me for a while. I got the machine from a third-party vendor. I did check Apple's refurb website because sometimes you find really good deals. Most of what I was seeing deal-wise was on laptops, and I really don't need another notebook at the moment. So from the specs, I can tell you that I have iMac Retina 5K screen. It's the late 2015 variety. I believe the processor is 3.3 gigahertz with 8 gigabyte of RAM. Now, this one has the 2 terabyte Fusion drive. I can tell you that when I compare it to my 2008 MacBook Pro, boot time, I don't notice a huge difference, but that was because I was already running an SSD in the MacBook. There's a little bit of a difference. It's not huge. That was not as big an issue for me because I don't reboot often. So boot time was not a big issue for me. A couple of the speed differences that I noticed, and keep in mind I haven't really seriously speed tested this yet, but just in terms of real world practicality here. When I launch something like Preview or iTunes, it's taking me a little getting used to, in the sense that those applications, particularly iTunes, took a second or two to launch on the MacBook. It was noticeable that it was taking time to launch. Whereas on the new machine, when I launched Preview the other night to help one of our forum members with something, Preview was open before I realized it was, because I have it set to just open to without any splash screen or anything like that. I'm sitting there waiting for Preview to open, and it's already open. Same thing with iTunes. iTunes opens much more quickly on the new machine. And that, in the case of iTunes, that's not affected by drive speed in the sense that my iTunes library is still sitting on the same USB 2 hard drive that I was using with the MacBook Pro. So that's not a drive speed issue per se. It's purely the horsepower of that processor. Both machines have 8 gigabyte of RAM, so RAM is not an issue. And here is the biggest difference that I noticed. Okay, I'm gonna duck down and check something. All right, this morning, every once in a while I work with some video files that are quite large. They're M2T files. And I had one yesterday that I ran. It's a 12 gigabyte file that I ran through Handbrake and had Handbrake convert it to something that I can use on the Apple TV, and I use the ATV3 presets. Okay. Now, I ran that file. It's a 12 gigabyte M2T file. It took it 1 hour, 39 minutes, and 40 seconds on the new machine. The resulting file was just over 5 gigabytes. All right. On the old machine, I started that conversion about 9:30, quarter to 10 this morning. Same file, coming off of the same USB 2 hard drive. Same 8 gigabyte of RAM. The only real difference is the laptop has a Core 2 Duo processor, and the new machine has the i5. The same file that took a little over an hour and a half yesterday on the new machine started about 9:45 this morning, and it's still got an hour to go on the laptop. Just over an hour to go. So that gives you an idea. By the time it's done, it will have taken roughly 11 hours, give or take. And that's with nothing else going on the laptop. Yesterday, when I ran the speed test on iMac, nothing else was going on it. So you're looking strictly at a difference of what the two processors can do. That, as you can tell, is a huge speed difference. And it's something that's going to take me some getting used to. As I say, I have not really had a chance to do some serious speed testing. I plan to do a little more of that in the coming weeks, and we'll have a little bit better rundown when I've had a chance to throw a few more tasks at it. So far, all of my old hardware works. The one thing I have noticed, because I do not have, on the older machines, you had a 3.5 millimeter audio jack for input and for headphones. That is not present on the iMac. What I'm using to plug in my mixer, my audio mixer, which uses a 3.5 millimeter plug, is the Griffin Technology iMac USB interface. I may have to change that to a different mixer. I noticed earlier when I was setting things up for the show, I'm getting some feedback at some points where I wasn't previously, especially when I had the iMac and the laptop up and going. And it seems that with that plugged in, with that USB, with that iMac adapter plugged in, I do get some feedback occasionally that I don't get once that adapter is removed. So that's going to take a little work to work out. May require a small change, but for the most part, all of my existing gear seems to be working well with it with no problem. And so I'm pretty pleased with what I was able to pull off. As I say, at some point, I will add more memory. I did not go the SSD route. I would love to have done it. In place of the Fusion drive, I would love to have put an SSD in here as a build to order option. I just couldn't justify the price of the SSD. At some point in the future, I may do that. If I do, I'll probably take it to a vendor and have them do it. It's not that it's impossible, but I've seen the teardowns on the last couple of generations of iMacs. It's not something that I'm comfortable doing with my clumsy fingers. So we'll probably save that for folks who are a little more competent with small tools and the like. And if I get the kind of performance that I've been getting the last few days, it may be a while before I go to an SSD. I lived without one for a long time. So, I'm going to wait and see how things go before I do that. When I do the memory will depend a lot on what I'm doing with the machine. Over the coming weeks, I plan to run some iMovie things through it just to see. I haven't used iMovie in a long time. One of my projects is to get to know it a little bit better. But as you can see from the speed difference between a conversion that took a little over an hour and a half yesterday versus one that's still going today from about 9:30 this morning, that's a significant change in speed for me. I'll still keep the laptop around. There are some times where it's going to be really useful, but I'm really pleased so far with the new machine. And that's going to just about do it, folks. Stay tuned. As I say, in the coming weeks, we'll have a little more in-depth, and we'll have some more thoughts and tips on looking at new machines. I'll probably, at some point, over Thanksgiving, right around Black Friday, somewhere in that range, I may be talking about, as more, a lot of folks get new machines over the holidays, get new tech gear over the holidays. I may spend some time on one of those future shows somewhere around Black Friday talking about what do you do with older gear? When is it worth it passing it on to somebody? When is it not worth? What are some of the recycling options as opposed to just chucking it in the landfill? We'll be talking about that. I'm going to post a thread probably coming up shortly in the forum about that in case some of our members have options that I'm not aware of. And we'll have that for you in a coming, like I say, look for that sometime probably the week after Thanksgiving. We'll try to get it done before the Christmas rush. But sometime during the holiday season, we'll talk about that a little bit because I think that's a good time to think about what we do with old gear and what's the best way to handle passing gear on to other people. And that's going to just about do it for this evening. We took just a little more than a half an hour there, but that's okay. That's going to do it for this evening. I hope that you've enjoyed this November 8th edition of the Mac Forum video chat. And I want to also take just a moment and for our U.S. listeners, Veterans Day is coming up this week. I want to say thanks to those guys. I know we have a number of veterans, military veterans, that are members of the forum. U.S. Veterans Day this week. I want to say thanks to you guys. And for those of you who are, you know someone that happens to be a veteran, pass along good wishes to them this week. And until next week, this is your host, Sylvester Rock. Look for me on the forum. I'm Sly Dude. And I'll see you next Sunday.